Welcome to the Cities of Migration Learning Exchange. Today's webinar is the second in a three-part series that we are co-hosting with Hire Immigrants to bring to life the recently released report, Investing in Refugee Talent. Lessons learned in labor market integration. Today's session is on thinking outside the box, innovative pathways to refugee employment. Employment plays a pivotal role in the integration and inclusion of refugees and all newcomers, of course, to their new communities. The newly arrived face myriad challenges when accessing the labor market, from language barriers and cultural differences to training needs and skill recognition. Refugees may also contend with the trauma of their dislocation. Many hands have a role to play, but employment agencies are typically at the forefront of helping refugees navigate these obstacles and access the employment opportunities that will support their integration and inclusion. Today's webinar introduces us to innovative tools developed to ease refugee pathways to employment and support the invaluable work of employment counselors and settlement workers. From Germany, Dr. Martin Nowak, senior expert with the Learning for Life program at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, will share the Careers via Competences project. And from Toronto, Ian Hartland, project manager at Magnet, will present the new Align initiative that utilizes a unique data matching technology to create fit-based matches between job seekers to in-demand occupations. I'm delighted to welcome our co-host and today's guest moderator, Devon Franklin, Project Manager with Hire Immigrants. Devon is joining us today in her capacity as Project Manager for Hire Immigrants, an online platform for employers to find and share good practices on immigrant employment, and a network hub for increased awareness of the skills and talent immigrants bring to local and global businesses. Over the last 2 years, a major focus of Devon's work at Hire Immigrants has been to promote the business case for refugee talent here in Canada, in Germany, and internationally. Devon also leads a project at Ryerson University called the Magnet Export Business Portal, which supports businesses and entrepreneurs to realize the benefits of tapping into foreign markets. So with this very rich agenda, I'm delighted to welcome Devon. Voila, the podium is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you everyone who's joining us today, whether it's the morning or afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in. I'm really excited about this webinar theme, this idea of thinking outside of the box, and I think, if anything, the two initiatives that we'll hear from today really show the opportunity and leveraging the opportunity of what the refugee movement has resulted in, and thinking about how do we look at settlement practices and employment practices and revise them in the face of a brand new population who have talents and skills that we need to effectively realize and make use of within our employment sector. I'm going to provide a really brief overview of Hire Immigrants because I want to give ample time to both Ian and Martin to speak about their tools and ample time for our audience to be able to ask them questions about how to make these tools and resources work in your communities. A little bit about Hire Immigrants. We are an online platform, and the goal is really to look at employment from the role of employers. How do we empower employers in the private sector to really fully leverage immigrants within their workforce, whether we're talking about economic immigrants, refugees, family class immigrants, depending on which community you're from. It's really about how do we leverage these talents and skill sets and ensure that employers really recognize the talents that these individuals bring. For Hire Immigrants, this means making the business case, and that's really been, as Kim mentioned, the last 2 years of our work has really focused on the refugee population and really making the business case for the talents and skills that these individuals bring to our communities and ensuring that employers have the hiring practices in place to really be able to realize these. So it's looking at what are your current hiring practices, how do you currently vet candidates, and really looking at evolving those. And that's what I'm really excited to hear from Ian and Martin because both identify really key tools that can be helped to to really evolve your hiring practices so that they are making use of and really reflecting the competencies that are in your midst amongst the refugee population. And then it's really connecting immigrant talent to the recruitment process. So how do we, as hire immigrants, act as a convener and connector for those two populations? Really what came to the fore for Hire Immigrants was acting as the key organizing body for the Refugee Jobs Agenda Roundtable, which was convened in late 2016. And really the focus was convening for employment. So bringing together a roundtable of local stakeholders from private and public sector employers, community organizations, service providers, government, industry associations, regional chambers of commerce, really everyone at the local level who has a touch point on employment, and bringing them to the table to really talk about what were the employers' needs and what was the disconnect or gap in terms of connecting with refugees. And what really became apparent in that roundtable model was that there were really committed employers and employers that had a genuine bona fide employment need that refugees could fulfill, and yet there was a real gap in their understanding on how settlement processes work, how to connect with refugees, and really the legalities around refugee status here in Canada. And so the roundtable really acted as a conduit and a catalyst for moving that refugee placement forward. We had over 40 members on the roundtable in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, everything from leading employment agencies like KPMG, LIUNA Local, our local trade union, Business Development Bank of Canada, as well as our core service providers like Access Employment, Magnet, which Ian will speak to, Triac, and then we had, again, local and government agencies, so the City of Toronto as well as our provincial and federal government at the table, who are really key at flagging for us if there were funding opportunities available, ways that the city could engage in some of these initiatives like job fairs. So it really was a roundtable that reflected all of the stakeholders that are really involved in moving the dial when it comes to refugee employment. Here's a few of our outcomes. What I'm really excited about is that Ian, as one of our roundtable members, will speak to the assessment tool for refugees that was developed out of a partnership between Magnet and OTEC that was connected at the roundtable, and then has really evolved and grown since that early introduction. But it really speaks to how the model can really act as a way to make those connections, and then people move on outside of the roundtable model to take those projects forward. Importantly, from the roundtable, we were able to, and with the support of Bertelsmann Stiftung, which Martin will speak to, we were able to release a report that really speaks to 13 international best practices. And we worked with our partners, Cities of Migration, to really leverage our combined network to demonstrate across the globe in our receiving communities of refugees what were some of the incredible best practices that came out from an employment lens. And so how were private sector partners engaged? How were multi-stakeholder roundtables similar to the one we launched in the GTA being seen in the German context as well? And how was that the same but also different for their local context? And so I really do encourage after the webinar to take a look at our report and learn more about some of these initiatives. So that's just a little bit more about Hire Immigrants. Like I said, I really want to give ample time to our speakers and look forward to a great audience discussion, because I think these two tools are replicable and can be utilized in your local context. So the first initiative we're going to explore comes from Magnet, an organization that's based at Ryerson University in Toronto. As members of the Roundtable, Magnet was pivotal at creating solutions utilizing technology, and so it really lends itself to the theme of today around thinking outside of the box. How do we leverage more innovative tools to solve some of our challenges when it comes to newcomer employment? So here to tell us more is Ian Hartland. As project manager, Ian is responsible for the Align initiative that utilizes a unique data matching technology powered by the Magnet platform. Align takes an innovative approach to labor market integration by leveraging an online psychographic assessment to create fit-based matches between job seekers and in-demand occupations. By providing this innovative tool to employment counselors, Ian is helping to build bridges between industry demand and eager newcomer job seekers. Funded by the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, Ian is leading the rollout of this innovative employment model across 3 provinces in Canada, Ontario, New Brunswick, and British Columbia. So Ian, the podium is yours. Take us through the Align model.
Thank you so much, Devin. And just before I begin, just want to say a big thank you to both Kim and Devin for hosting this. I'm really happy and honored today to be involved with Cities and Migration and the great work that you are doing. So as Devin said, she gave me, I think, a great overview to start here. And I'll just advance through my slides very quickly. Thank you. As Devin said, Magnet, for those of us local to Ontario or Toronto, you may have heard of Magnet. Those tuning in from elsewhere, I'll provide a brief overview. Magnet is a not-for-profit digital social innovation that was founded at Ryerson University in 2014. It came out of our digital media zone here at Ryerson University, incubated here at the university. It began as a way to match graduating students from Ryerson University into positions. Has now sort of grown, and we're using this technology in new and innovative ways. I sometimes joke that Magnet is like a dating website for jobs. So what happens is job seekers log onto the platform, they fill out a digital portfolio with skills, experience, preferences, and the platform actively matches those skills and experiences to open positions that are posted by employers. So like I said, what began as a way to facilitate new graduates finding their way into employment has now expanded, and our work crosses a variety of areas now. Here you can see that there's 3 main pillars that our work touches: careers, business, and communities, but all with the same goal, which is to connect Canadians to economic opportunity and build inclusive economic growth in our country. Today I want to talk about a specific way that we're using the Magnet platform, and this is a recent project that we've developed called Align. Align is another way of using Magnet's matching technology, but doing this through a unique way to create an alternative type of match. So Align, to give you a little background, came out of a partnership with the Ontario Tourism Education Corporation. And what we're doing here is it's a new set of features in Magnet that delivers unique functionality. So instead of matching job seekers based on their previous experience or skills, what we're doing is we're going to match job seekers based on the personality attributes of individuals by assessing for aptitude and matching them based on that aptitude and their fit for a given role. So this overcomes, in my opinion, some of the issues that can face newcomers based on missing experience or non-traditional experience. So if you have an individual, for example, that's arrived in the country and they're having difficulty getting their experience from their country of origin recognized, perhaps the institution itself no longer exists, how can we facilitate ways for these job seekers to be matched with employers overcoming that gap in experience or that lack of recognition for experience? We're doing this by matching them based on this fit for a given role instead of focusing on experience. Looks like my formatting on this slide got a little mixed up, but Martin, my colleague here, made a joke that the squares make sense because we're moving towards being the star at the end. So this is just a quick breakdown of how the Align functionality works on Magnet. So as I mentioned before on the previous slide, what we're doing here is matching based on aptitude and fit. So how this begins is we engage employers in sectors that are facing key labor shortages, and through this we create benchmarks. Working with our partners, OTEC, we have a variety of individuals at a cross-section of businesses take a personality assessment, and this will create a candidate profile that represents the personality and aptitude that will succeed in a given job family. From there, we then have job seekers facilitated by service providers take the same personality assessment to identify their traits and work style preferences. After that, Magnet will then match the individuals, the job seekers that take this assessment, with those benchmarked roles. The job seekers are then actively invited to apply to the roles and connect with the employers. I'll walk through this in a little bit more detail on the next slides. So you can see here on the left, this is a visual representation of what the personality assessment outputs. for a given individual. So we've partnered with another organization called Lumina Learning based out of the UK, and they provide this psychometric assessment that individuals take. It's called Lumina Spark, if anyone would like to do further research after this webinar. Lumina Spark identifies 4 quadrants. You can see that on the diagram to the left. These 4 quadrants are spread across 8 aspects and generate 24 qualities. Again, this is all what I'm trying to capture in this image on the left. But I think really what I want to highlight is that Lumina is not a typing-based assessment, nor is it static. It's a behavioral-based assessment that's trying to focus on traits rather than assigning types to individuals. It's not, trying to identify skills as individuals come through this, but rather aptitudes, showing what the underlying you, the overextended you, is really a best fit for. After an individual takes that assessment, this image on the right is sort of what they would see in the Magnet platform. It also highlights which occupations from those in-demand sectors we've been able to benchmark thus far. So as mentioning previously, we worked very closely with the Ontario Tourism Education Corporation. So most of our early roles that we benchmarked into this platform were in the tourism and hospitality sector. So you can see food and beverage server, housekeeping, line cook, barista. We work closely with Starbucks Canada to create that benchmark, landscaping technician. But as this project expands, we're also adding some higher skill roles. This is based on feedback we've received from our partners as we've worked through our first year on this project. We'll be adding project manager, technical sales, and some others in development. Materials handler, food and beverage processing. Those are some others, and I can speak to this more in the Q&A section. So as Devin mentioned, the Align project is being rolled up and scaled up through funding with Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. This is a 3-year project that spans 3 provinces and territories and 10 service providers with a few high-level goals. One, we really want to focus on Align being a program enhancement for our service providers that we are working with. The idea here is that we're trying to increase the capacity of settlement organizations through the use of technology. This is a service delivery improvement grant from the Government of Canada, so this is really its focus. How can we facilitate systems change and collective impact through providing both refugees and lower skilled newcomers with new and innovative tools and supports, while at the same time giving frontline service providers and employment counselors new ways to facilitate connections between job seekers and industry that needs talent. Finally, and from the university's perspective and from the government's perspective, there's a real interest in testing and evaluating this model. Certainly, as an SDI grant, this is an innovative and a new approach to making change in this space. And so we really do have an interest in testing the hypotheses here. Will an aptitude-based fit lead to better outcomes for job seekers? Will it close gaps, open new recruitment funnels for industry that are looking for talent? Right now, these are all assumptions that we're making through testing this platform. But for me, this is a really key goal of what we're trying to accomplish with Align. And lastly, you can see here just a quick overview of some of the partners that we've engaged on this project. As I just mentioned, it's a 3-year initiative. What began just simply in the province of Ontario, now with funding from the Government of Canada, can scale up across our country. We're going to be working in Ontario in our first fiscal year, then expanding to British Columbia and New Brunswick, in our 3rd year returning to Ontario to work in some other communities, Ottawa, Windsor, and London, Ontario, for example. On the right is some of the service providers, a cross-section of a few that are partnering with us on this initiative. And last, just a thank you. I hope I provided a good overview for everyone today through this webinar. You can learn more at magnet.today/align or send questions to info@magnet.today. I also really welcome some questions in the Q&A section, and I look forward to it. So back over to you, Devin. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. That was a great overview, and I'm sure, as with any new technology, there'll be lots of questions, I'm sure, about really the nuts and bolts of how it works for an employment counselor working with this population and wanting to help, find pathways to new employment opportunities. So thank you so much, and look forward to the questions in the Q&A. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Martin Nowak from the Bertelsmann Stiftung. As a senior expert at Bertelsmann, Martin is responsible for the project Careers via Competencies in the program Learning for Life at Bertelsmann Stiftung in Gütersloh, Germany. The project aims at improving the chances of people with low levels of formal qualification to participate in further education and qualified work. To this end, the project develops, tests, and promotes concepts and tools of competence assessment, development, and recognition. So I think I've given a brief overview, but I look forward to your presentation. Martin, the podium is yours.
Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you also, Kim, for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to be able to showcase our tools that we have developed. Just a quick short introduction. At Bertelsmann Stiftung, we are a private non-profit organization, a foundation. We have roughly 70 projects running at any given point in time in as diverse topics as education, democracy, society, and so on and so forth. The program Learning for Life, of course, being situated in the education pillar of our foundation. Typical outputs of the Bertelsmann Stiftung are studies where we try to highlight problems that we face in society, events where we bring together people to discuss which could be possible solutions, and to then also engage in developing pilot projects that contribute to the solution of such problems. And we're always having this claim, inspiring people, shaping the future, participating in a globalized world back in our minds to bring forward society, mostly in Germany, but also abroad. Now, when we look at the situation of 2015, you might have heard that Germany was one of the countries that had the strongest influx of refugees from Syria and beyond to Germany. And one of their problems was that in order to get a labor market integration, they had to overcome the barrier of having to have a formal education degree. That could be a vet degree or a higher education degree, but only very few people actually brought that with them. So we have people that are formally low skilled because the formal vet system that Germany is so proud of and is also exporting even, that doesn't apply everywhere. But 61% of the asylum seekers had substantial work experience. So the question is, how could we make visible what they would actually bring to the table? A problem that also Ian has talked about. We are focusing in our work not only on refugees and migrants, but more broadly, as Devin has said, on the so-called low-skilled. I don't like the term so much because usually they are only low qualified in terms of formal qualifications. There's lots of skills to be seen, as I will tell you in a second. But just to see the numbers, we have over 4 million people that do not have a vet or a higher education degree between 25 and 65 years old in Germany. And they face a 4 times higher unemployment rate and a 3 times lower adult education participation. That means that instead of catching up to the rest, they fall further and further behind. So this is what we call the Mathieu Principle. Those who have shall be given, and this we need to turn around, especially in education. Now, at the same time, we also have skilled labor shortages. So we can preview already now that especially people with vet qualifications will be missing on the German labor market due to demographic change. And here there's a potential of, let's say, tapping the potential of low-skilled and also refugees and migrants to fill those labor shortages. One last thing that I want to say before I go to the next slide is we did a study at the beginning of last year analyzing which kind of jobs do these so-called low-qualified, low-skilled actually get from their employers. And it turns out that it's much fewer people who go into helpers professions, very simple tasks, than we would anticipate. In fact, it's only 30% of the so-called low-skilled that get a helper job. 70% are either working at a skilled laborer's level, that it would be qualification framework level 3 to 4 to 5, a vet degree, or even higher as a specialist or even as an expert. So obviously skills are there, and for 70% of the people, the employers do make use of those skills. But if these people want to switch professions or employers, they cannot take these skills with them, or at least they cannot signal them on the labor market. Now, for that, we need validation of prior learning. And in the European Union, there's a process since 2012 going on that all member states have to develop processes for validation of informal and non-formal learning. And that's always 4 phases. So first comes the identification, which leads to the self-awareness of your own capabilities. Then in the documentation phase, you try to deliver some evidence on where you could have acquired, for example, teamwork skills or other professional skills. The third phase is the assessment phase, where you stop looking bottom up from the individual to see what is there, but you start looking top down from the formal qualifications or from the occupational standards to see which skills that are needed for certain jobs are already there, and where are the gaps that need to be filled with further education. The fourth phase is the certification, where actually a partial or full qualification is given to the candidate going through the validation process. However, this is a process where you have universities and chambers who are responsible for this, so we engage in the other three phases with our activities. And we have developed, well, first we started with a questionnaire and some interviews with experts in career guidance, but also migration counseling. And we asked them, why did they not use instruments for making skills visible? And they were telling us that existing instruments were too theoretical, too much reliant on written language, too time-consuming, too complex, and actually incompatible between systems. For example, the migration counseling system and the public employment service. And so the call was raised to us to develop instruments that would be practically relevant, visualized and multilingual, modularized, easy and quick to use, and integrated, bridging migration and other counseling systems. And these are the four instruments that we have developed until now. The first, I will say a few more words in a second. That's the competence cards, helping identify and document transversal skills. That is soft skills, but also method skills that are not particular to one profession. The second are the career cards. Here, it's like if you wish, a picture book of the German professions. Germany has 327 vet professions, formal qualifications, and half of them are displayed with pictures on those cards. And there's for 30 of the professions, there's even details on which soft skills are required in this and that particular profession. These are two analog tools that can be used in counseling sessions or guidance sessions. Now, there's two digital tools that we've developed as well. One is myprofessionalexperience.org. It's a free self-assessment of vocational skills in 30 professions that you can easily check out after our webinar. It takes 5 minutes, and then you see in which fields you have already experiences. And the good thing about it is in 6 languages, so that we can use it also with refugees in Farsi, Arabic, and so on and so forth. The last tool addresses the need of employers to know what people can actually do. The self-assessment is something about how many times have you done a certain task in a certain job. But with My Skills, you find out how competent you actually are if you do the things the right way. This takes, of course, 4 hours for each of the 30 professions. But it delivers competence levels not for the whole profession as a 0-1, but as partial qualifications, so to say. So we broke down vet professions into 4 to 7 areas, and for these 4 to 7 areas of professional activity, with My Skills and myprofessionalexperience.org, we can say how competent someone is. And this is really helpful to integrate people into a labor market, even if they do not have the full formal degree. Now I'm coming to the competence cards to show you one of the tools more in detail. And at the top of the page, you see the partners, which are the 7 non-statutory welfare organizations in Germany, with whom and for whom we have developed this tool, together with their guides and counselors. You see, the focus of the competence cards is the key visual to the right. So for each of the skills, like teamwork skills here, you see a drawing that could represent the skill, even if you do not speak German or English in this case. And we have 48 such transversal skills in the set overall. The front of the cards are geared towards the client, and there's an easy language sentence. For example, here, I'm able to work with others and solve problems. And then you see at the right hand, the translation of the skill into 8 different languages. Farsi, Arabic, Tigrinya, Russian, Turkish, and also French and Spanish. At the back of each of those cards, you see information for the guide. For example, a second sentence, simple sentence of an explanation of the skill. And some questions that gear towards the documentation in terms of, can you please explain a situation where you have shown your teamwork skill? And then there's references to other competences in the set. In addition, you can find also an instruction video linked to our website. If you just Google competence cards, you should be able to find it together with them. I just show you a couple of those skills here. Again, you see the social skills in green, the personal skills, like, for example, resilience or determination or reliability in yellow. You see that some cards have a red frame. These red frame cards are actually related to those competences that are also assessed in the public employment services in Germany. So while in total we have 48 skills, only 20 of those are used in the public employment services, and these are highlighted so that a migration counselor can send someone directly over to the PES, and they don't need to do the whole interview again, but can take from this list of red frames. And here you see in blue the method and technical skills that people might have, and in addition 11 interest cards. These interest cards are very good for breaking the ice at the beginning of a session, or if you have someone who's very shy or has to deal with trauma from their times as a refugee, and you can start easy before you move into the skills, the professional field. All of these competences, you can cards you can put on the table, and you can put them next to the plus, double plus, and triple plus card in order to get some information about the level. So if something is if a skill like teamwork skills is something that someone has really strongly, or that it's her passion, or that she is only a little bit off. And if the skill is not in his skill set or her skill set, the card will just be put aside so that we only have a set of strengths at the end of the process. Here you can, in the documentation template, put down which skills are there, and this is also available as a Word doc so that you can delete all the skills that are not there, so you really have only a list of strengths at the end. We have now translated those cards also in these other languages so that you can download them for free. They are CC by SA licensed, so you can even change the pictures or the cards. You can add cards. If you just send me an email, I will send you the source data. And it's very easy to work with those cards. We only have a manual of 1 page. And to wrap up, just some background feedback that we got from users who did not only come from migration counseling, but also from education providers, from public employment services and volunteer initiatives. And they say that using the competence cards, they could identify skills faster and better, that it prepares well the clients for moving to the PES, that are more practical, more flexible. And while we initially planned to only issue 1,000 competence card sets for all migration counselors in Germany, now we have 12,000 sets in the market, and more coming every day. So we are very happy also to share this as open content. Here's the link for you to download it. And with that, I only want to finish with inviting you to the VPL Biennale, which will take place in 1 month in Berlin. So if you don't have anything to do on 7th and 8th of May, and you don't want to learn more about validation of skills and competences, you can still register today and tomorrow for this conference. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Martin. That was jam-packed with information. I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions from our participants for a little bit more details. What I love about both Ian and Martin's presentations is they demonstrate that from, really high-tech type tools to competence cards, which are really something that you can leverage in one-on-one meetings between a client and a counselor. And these are tools that are can be utilized kind of across the board, regardless of and cognizant of any type of budget. And both opportunities, both tools appear to be very open to collaborating with new counselors. So if there's anyone in the settlement and employment space on our webinar today, these webinar decks will be shared with all the information about both initiatives, and I do encourage you to reach out to both Martin and Ian if you're interested in learning more about the initiatives. So as we turn it over to Kim Turner and the team at Cities of Migration to lead the audience Q&A, I'm just going to get us started with a few questions for our distinguished panelists just to get us started, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. So please, as I'm asking Ian and Martin a couple of follow-up questions, please start putting in your own questions for the panelists so that we can get to as many as possible from our audience. So Martin, given that you just went, we'll start with you. So you mentioned, and you kind of gave a brief overview, but maybe you can give us a little bit more detail. The competence cards are really one of 4 initiatives that have been launched to really help to validate the skills of migrants. Can you give me a little bit more detail about the other 3 opportunities and initiatives that you mentioned, the career cards and the 2 digital tools, My Professional Experience and My Skills? And And how would, refugees, but also employment or settlement counselors utilize these tools that are available?
Gladly, Devin, thank you. So it is interesting, when we ran this evaluation of the competence cards, our respondees, they told us they need two additional things. They need something regarding professional skills, not only transversal skills, and they need some digital tool for their work. And so we developed the career cards together with them in a round of 3 sets of workshops with practitioners for their need, in order to come up with this image-based and translated tool that basically explains to refugees and migrants how the German labor market works. And we will, it's currently in press, so in April, early May, the career cards will come out, and people are really looking forward to receiving them, and I will be gladly reporting on how it's used later. Now, the two digital tools, they build on each other. So when the refugee crisis, if you want to call it that, hit in Germany, the public employment services were looking for tools to make their skills visible. And we were also thinking about how to do that. And then we stumbled across a project that was using videos and images to basically digitalize the standard chamber examination of professional vet people. And then we thought, like, wow, if you can actually make it with a video, you can even translate it in these different languages. And then you have 120 items per profession, where people will have to, for example, decide in which order do you have to plant which kind of crops, or what is the mistake done in a certain video in repairing a car. So it's very hands-on. And if you go to myskills.de/en for English, then you can find examples of the items there. Now, the last one, myprofessionalexperience.org, this is something that refugees can actually use themselves. If they have a smartphone, they can go to the website and they can switch at any point in time between 6 languages, and then they can search among the 30 professions that we have there and just go through the test and have this self-assessment. And it's always one image presented, and the question is, how often have you done this before? From 0 times to 50 times and more. And it's all typical vocational actions that are part of what is the requirement in that profession. So it gives them, at the end, a very nice overview of how their experiences that they might have acquired abroad, how they fit to the German labor market.
That's fantastic, and thank you, Martin. I know all those initiatives are jam-packed with content, so I appreciate you giving us a brief overview, and it looks like there'll be a few more questions from our audience members regarding more of the initiatives, so I'll leave it to our audience and move on to you, Ian. So interestingly, the Align as a tool is really targeted to service providers rather than just an open URL to kind of send to refugees to guide themselves. And so thinking about, when you were, working on launching this initiative, why was this approach taken rather than targeting refugees directly? Oftentimes working with more people, more organizations makes the work, a little bit more challenging. And so why was the approach taken to really work directly with service providers?
Yeah, thank you, Devin. It's a great question. I mean, I think that there's a few reasons for this. Let's say one kind of principled and another practical. In the practical sense, I mentioned as I went through kind of the final couple slides of my presentation there that Align is first and foremost meant as a program enhancement for service providers. So as a standalone tool, it's really not sufficient in my opinion. It relies on the wraparound services that programming already delivered by employment service providers provide, right? So for example, the personality assessment that is output for job seekers, that can be used as a tool with a frontline employment counselor to start conversations with an individual if they're looking to be matched into a lower skilled role or a survival job, so to speak. Why choose job A over job B? This result of the personality assessment that they receive, showing aptitude for certain sectors over others or certain job families, can help facilitate that conversation. So on one hand, I think just if we administered simply to job seekers on their own, they wouldn't be receiving those wraparound services and supports that are really essential. And two, the tool also should be seen as a productivity tool for the employment service provider as well, right? We can some of the functionality that I didn't get into today, but they can monitor connections in the back end through a dashboard feature where they can see which jobs their job seekers have been invited to and whether those job seekers have followed up with those jobs. So this allows them some more, say, monitoring and insight into the types of connections that their job seekers are receiving. And then second, I think sort of the principled answer here about why we always work in a partnership model is one of Magnan's goals in this space is to facilitate collaboration and kind of defragment the employment service provision space in Ontario and Canada. And so by forming this network model that brings in both industry sectors, employers themselves, employment service providers, job seekers, we're really attempting to stitch together this system and create more facilitation and collaboration throughout it.
That's fantastic, and I think it really speaks to your point about wraparound services, and that it's really evolving our thinking when it comes to employment placements and working one-on-one with clients. And for those that are outside of the space, sometimes it's not as intuitive as just completing an assessment and then it automatically ends up in employment. It's really having those wraparound services and identifying that it may not be employment immediately, and there may be some training and qualification that is required before getting to that employment opportunity. So I think that's a really important nuanced way of thinking about employment opportunities when working with different types of populations. A question for you, Martin. Thinking about these 4 initiatives, and some have been longer or more, have been ongoing for longer, so there may be more outcomes associated. But certainly in this space, outcomes have become increasingly important. So thinking about service providers and funders alike wanting to know, what's working in this space, what's really linking, refugees, regardless of kind of what space they're in, what's working to really have them find that employment opportunity. So can you provide any success stories from these initiatives? And just based on time, maybe we'll only have time for one success story from using one of your initiatives.
Thank you, Devin. Yes. You can look at YouTube and Google for My Skills, and then you will find a couple of videos of people who actually went through My Skills successfully and did find a job at different companies. So that's quite nice to see there. But one example that is also quite catching always is when you look at the competence cards, and we have these 2 cases that we always report from one of the guys that we've worked in setting up those cards. And one is the case of Gülcan, who was a Turkish immigrant to Germany, and she was married to a man that abused her. Unfortunately, she had 2 children. And eventually she got the courage to leave him, but then she had to support her own family, and that was really difficult for her. So she went into the migration counseling, and she was one of those people where you could not get easy access to. And using those cards, those very visual cards, putting them in front of her and starting to tell her story, that was really helpful. That's at least what Ramona Lopez, the guide, describes. And at the end of the day, she managed to identify that there were actually some skills that she had, which she never had thought before. And after this process, they could set up together an application, the guide and her, and she found a job at a caretaking facility. And she did like the job, but unfortunately she had the feeling that all these elderly people, they were too much in pain when she left them with all her sympathy that she gave them, so that she found it emotionally too challenging to actually take the job that would have come out of the system. However, the employer was really fascinated by her commitment and her reliability and gave her a different job in the company, so now she can support. And I think that is one of very many good success stories that guides tell me whenever I talk.
That's fantastic, and I think you highlighted a key factor that I think has come up across both of your tools is that oftentimes when newcomers arrive in a new community, that transferable nature of their skill set isn't always top of mind, and so these tools are really key at identifying that those skills are transferable in this new economy, are transferable in this new community. And that's fantastic that the employer, after seeing the commitment and dedication of the talent, recognized that there was an incentive to create a create a role for her within the company. So that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So Kim, it looks like we've got lots of comments coming in from the audience, and so I'm going to turn it back over to you to lead our audience Q&A, and I encourage audience members to make use of both Ian and Martin while we have them on the webinar to ask questions about their initiatives and the local context that they work in. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you, Martin and Ian. We've had a very rich set of presentations, and we have some great questions coming in. And so let's start with a very basic question. This one comes from Hasti, and she wants to know whether, she asks Dr. Martin, would a refugee who lives in Bremen, Germany, be able to use these resources, and how? And if I may add, would a refugee in Toronto be able to use these resources, and how? But so let's answer Hasti's question, Martin.
Yes. For Bremen, it would be quite easy. They could use all 4 of them. For myprofessionalexperience.org, they could simply access the website and do the test themselves in German or in their native tongue. For the competence cards and the career cards, they would need to go to a migration counselor or a PES counselor who are currently using those cards. For example, in the city of Munich, all public employment servants that are working with migrants have those cards. So Munich might be a better example than Bremen. And for my skills, this is currently rolled out only in Germany, but in all 156 public employment areas. And there, if you go to your public employment agent and you say that you've heard of this tool and that you would like to get tested to see what your chances are, then there's a very high likelihood that your public employment servant will say okay, let's send you to that test. The transferability, of course, of the competence cards is the highest because those transversal skills are relevant also in other countries. For example, I could easily imagine this. While with the other tools, there might be a bit more adaptation needed because the VET system in Germany is, of course, very formalized. I don't know so much about the Canadian system. I think, however, looking at those pictures and images and the descriptions, it might still be useful to use the tool. And it's a 5-minute tool. It's a free tool. So I don't see why, if you don't have any other way of showing your past experience in the professional world, you shouldn't use myprofessionalexperience.org.
Very good. Well, I hope that people online who are working in this sector outside of Germany do take an opportunity to look at these rather extraordinary tools, because the replicability and transferability is a really important part of what we hope to take away from these sessions. So let's move on to our next question. This one is from Nikki Dunlop, and she's asking you, Ian, whether Align can be used to support lower-level language clients.
This is a great question, Nikki. Thank you. I'll be transparent with the answer on this. When we first launched Align and it was in development, I believe that the parties that were involved in creating it targeted a CLB level 4, right? And I'm now coming into this space, I realize that that's a relatively low language level. I think the challenge with a program like Align is because it's housed inside of a technology platform, there's certain digital literacy skills and just pure literacy skills that are required in order to successfully use the tool. Now, that being said, the assessment itself that I mentioned is available in a number of languages. It's available in, I believe, 16 languages, and we have 4 right now active: English, French, Arabic, and Spanish. So an individual can take this assessment in their mother tongue, but accessing the full suite of the tool and the platform does require a level of English that, frankly, through experience, we're learning is a little bit higher than that CLB level 3 or 4 that was initially targeted. So all of this to say, certainly we want to be able to make this tool available to a lower language level client, but there has been challenges in successfully doing this thus far. So what we've been trying to do moving into our second year of this project is work more closely with the employment service providers that we're partnered with on this initiative to gain their expertise and advice on what supports could we provide to enhance that and make it easier for a prospective job seeker to use the tool effectively. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, that's great. So I have a question here from Menina, again for you, Ian, Menina would like to know whether you can walk us through more information on how a candidate would be matched within the Align platform.
Yeah, certainly. It's tough in a short few slides to show the full depth of the kind of the functionality of this platform. So I'll do my best here, Menina, and if you would like a demo, we could set that up ourselves and I could walk you through exactly how this works. But briefly now, what this entails is an individual takes an assessment. The assessment is about 144 questions. On average, it takes an individual 30 to 45 minutes to complete. Like I said in my previous answer, this can be done in English or in a number of other languages. Once they complete that assessment, they will receive the results, and they basically get a fit score, right? And this is only visible by the employment service provider or an individual who's looking at the back end, kind of the administrative functions of the platform. They can see the corresponding fit score as a result of that assessment to those benchmarked roles that I discussed at the beginning. So let's take, for example, the barista role that we work with Starbucks to create. So after an individual takes the assessment, they are given a fit score. We rank it low, medium, or high to that benchmark, the barista role. If they receive a medium or a high fit score after that assessment, then they're automatically matched to roles that employers put into the system or job developers through an employment service provider populate that are inside of that barista job family. So again, I hope that answers your question, and if you would like a more in-depth demo walking you through exactly how this functions, I'm happy to do this over a separate call.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Ian. Now I have a question for both Ian and for Martin from Sue Baptiste, who provides a very specific context. Sue Baptiste leads delivery of a bridging program for health professionals. She finds that a major barrier to is breaking down employers' views and willingness to become flexible in considering individuals for roles for which they may not have formal credentials. So she asks, do you have any wisdom to offer about orienting and supporting employers in this area? So I guess the question is, how have you worked with employers to help them understand the value these tools offer their work? And why don't we start with you, Martin, where you've gone from distributing 1,000 of these cards to 12,000. That's quite a staggering success rate for just that one tool. So what have you done that has helped employers engage so successfully in this work?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, because when we started our project 6 years ago, we thought about focusing on the healthcare sector because we knew that the labor shortages there would be strong and stay strong, and that we could start really focusing on developing a tool particularly for that sector. The reason why we didn't is that after talking with a couple of employers and also employer association representatives, we got the feeling that they are really, as you describe it, very inflexible, because they see the opening up to validation of prior learning as something like lowering the quality standards in the healthcare sector, and they are already under fire with regard to this topic of quality assurance. Now, when we describe myprofessionalexperience.org and my skills to them, however, to some of those employers, for example, the non-statutory welfare organizations who also have lots of elderly care centers and so on and so forth, they were very psyched about it. Why? Because they could see when we showed them how we developed the items for my skills, how hard the test actually is. So if you convince them about the rigor and the quality of the assessment method, and that it's pretty much at the level or even above of the usual standard formal qualification assessments, then this is the bridge for them to say, like, okay, so it's not a lower qualification. It's, in fact, if anything, it might be even higher if you get 4 out of those 4 bubbles per action field. And what we observe also is that within the healthcare sector at the moment, we have this tendency to see we build a bridging employment. So you have this 3-year program of an elderly care assistant, and then you have a 1.5 year program, so to say. And if there is some flexibility starting to pop up now in the system, just due to the high demand in workers. And if we use that and then we come with a quality tool, this is where a bridge can be built.
Ian, thank you. And Ian, would you like to comment?
Absolutely, and I'll kind of piggyback on Martin's answer a little bit here. I think assuring employers about the viability or rigorousness of the tool itself is essential in this. But also I would say that the proof ends up in the pudding here. If I can get employers who have had success onboarding a job seeker through this non-traditional match process where they're hiring for aptitude and training for skill afterwards, a big part of our pitch to that employer is because this individual has the aptitude to succeed in a given role, they are going to be more likely, like I said, to succeed in that role. They're more likely to stay on. And because we've targeted sectors that have high demand and are suffering from, high rates of turnover, this is a real value proposition to the employer. So once I get a few of these, we call them anchor employers in the space, that have had success both onboarding and retaining staff through this model, then that becomes a case study that I can hold up to the future employer and assure them that hiring in this way is actually going to lead to both good employees and somebody that's not really further behind than somebody that you might have hired through, based on experience or previous qualifications.
Very good. Actually, this is a question that we're getting a lot of questions related to this challenge of how to engage employers. So this is so let's probe here a little bit more closely. Ines Rios, for example, is a wraparound settlement service provider in Ontario, in Canada, and focusing on employer engagement, and she wants to know what strategies you would recommend that they employ to convince employers that transferable skills and work experience is just as valuable as formal technical qualifications. So for both Ian and for Martin, what are some sort of high-level tips that you can give settlement workers about how to engage employers in this area of recognizing transferable skills that are outside the more formally recognized skill areas? How about Martin? Do you want to comment? What's the question here? Sort of, for anyone working in this space, needing to engage employers, basically asking them to take what looks like a risk to the employer. What are some strategies for persuading people to come on board?
Well, I can only second what Ian has said before. You need to acquire early on a good case study that has high credibility. And if you look at the MySkills videos of successful cases, this is exactly what you find. You find MAN, a very big company, a car company, and this is a shining example. And we have now in contact with DHL and other larger companies who are really interested in using this wide scale in among their staff even. So this is step one. Step two is, as I said before, you have to show them the rigorousness of the tools that you have. And the third thing that you can do is you can gear them towards what's possible in other countries. Because what we do now with our VPL Biennale is we showcase good practice examples from other countries. And for example, in France, I don't know if you know that, any formal degree can be acquired also completely via validation of prior learning. So even a PhD, you can get it without ever having seen a university from the inside. For that, you need to have a portfolio and you need to show that you know everything that a PhD needs to know. And for example, psychology, my field, you would have had to publish 3 scientific articles and you need to give a defense of your research. But if you pass that, then you get the degree. You get the formal degree, and it's not even discernible from the degree of the formal system. So you get exactly the same certificate. And if this works in France, then why should this not work in other countries? And in France, employers are very much involved in this whole system of VAE, Validation Acquis d'Expérience. So if anyone wants to check this out, I can really recommend.
Okay, well that is wonderful. That's a brilliant answer. And Ian, do you want to comment with a tip for reaching out and engaging employers to think differently about these issues?
Absolutely. And first, Martin, that's fascinating example from France. I was not aware
Yeah.
of that, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. I'll have to look into that. Okay, just reviewing that question. I think Martin covered a lot of this, right, Kim, is having anchor employers and case studies is essential. But another piece here that's specific to Align in this project is we create the benchmarks that job seekers are matched against in partnership with employers and industry. So part of the value add that they get, not just in terms of securing a new funnel for talent, right, through this alternative way of matching with job seekers, part of creating the benchmark process is also having their own employees take the same psychometric assessment that the job seekers are taking. So we can give back to them a cross-section of the aptitude traits and personality traits of their own staff members. And to me, that's a really powerful tool to use to convince them that this will work. If you're looking at who's succeeded in your own organization and you're able to show them that success is in some way correlated to their personality traits and aptitude, and then matching an individual who's coming in based on those same traits, it creates a lot of confidence with that employer. I know that's specific to our project, but it's an example of how you can kind of leverage and build that confidence. So, go ahead.
Yeah, these evidence-based approaches are really critical for working in this particular constituency. Well, we've had an incredibly interesting exchange. I've got time just for one last question, and this one is for you, Devin. Devin, Clayton Lyon wants to know how you decided which specific employers, community orgs, service providers, etc., to invite to the Refugee Job Roundtable. And so maybe you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Clayton. And really, when the roundtable was first initiated, it was really organic. We were fortunate enough to have the leadership of Senator Ratna Ahmedbar, and who has a wealth of contacts and networks in the space. And so it really started organically with a simple email from Senator Ahmedbar saying, this is, what we're anticipating in terms of numbers of refugees in the GTA. Are there any, organizations, employers, settlement, service providers that are interested in coming together and really talking through, how are we prepared to receive this population, and specifically, how are we going to support them in finding employment? Because she recognized that, a lot of settlement concerns, housing, health, clothing, these concerns were top of mind and being tackled kind of from all angles. But employment seemed to be a missing factor. And so it started organically with asking any employers that had vacancies or had capacity to support in the employment pathways for refugees to come together, and then naturally from there, service providers, who had connections to the refugee community, were attending the roundtable and offering to make those connections and to work closely with employers to build programs to support those vacancies. To that end, anyone who's on the call from Canada, we are relaunching the roundtable and really taking a broader scope in terms of looking nationally to support all employers who are really looking to connect with the refugee population when it comes to filling job vacancies. And so, Clayton, I'm not sure what space you're in, whether it's on the service side or a business leader yourself, but please reach out to me after the webinar if you're interested in joining. Our first meeting will be April 16th, and so connect with me if you're interested in joining the initiative. We're looking to, as I said, roll it out nationally.
That's great. Thank you very much, Devin. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Martin. I'm going to wrap up now. We're at the end of the Q&A. I'm going to ask you all just one very last, what I like to call my short fire question. And today I'm going to, if there was one thing that we could do to bring more employers on board, given the interest in this question, what would that be? In a word or two, Devin? What's the one thing we could do to bring more employers on board?
Yeah, I think it's making the ask for employers smaller. So rather than saying, you need to hire or giving kind of a directive, instead asking the employer, what can you do today and how can we work with you to expand that in the future? So maybe today they can only offer a short-term contract or an internship. Maybe today they can only make an in-kind donation of technology or staff time to help build out a program. But looking at what can they do today, and then through developing that trust and that relationship, demonstrating the talent and values that refugees bring to their workforce, and that really expands from there. Our Business Development Bank of Canada is a prime example on the roundtable, working with Access Employment, developed a pilot internship program, saw the value, saw what it contributed to their employment, and now they're rolling it out nationally. So a really great example of starting small, demonstrating the value, and then it can always be expanded.
Starting small and exhibiting the value, building, scaling up from there. How about you, Martin? Do you have one thing to recommend for bringing more employers on board?
Well, I think the first thing is to actually engage with them, to talk with them about their needs. At least this is useful in a country like ours where we have skilled labor shortages. So there is the need for people that have skills and that are motivated. And then if you get them on board, many are actually willing to invest, also to contribute to this situation with the refugees. And then the important thing is that you don't let them alone then. That you accompany them, that you have guides and counselors also for the employers once a process like this is started. So that there is good cases, successful cases that then can transfer and translate and motivate for further uptake by other employers.
Well, very good. So engage with them and continue to travel with them as they develop their capacity to work in this area. That's wonderful. And how about you, Ian? Is there one thing that you would recommend all of us do to bring more employers on board?
First, both great answers from Devin and Dr. Martin, but I'm going to say evidence here, Kim. I think the success and the promotion of programs like Martin's, like Alliance and ourselves, can bring confidence and examples of real-world case studies of success to employers, and in my experience, that evidence is the key thing that will build confidence with them.
That's great. So that evidence is confidence building. Those were wonderful answers. I want to thank you very much, all of you. Our time has run out, and so on behalf of all of our participants today, Cities of Migration and Higher Immigrants, let me thank our co-host, Devin Franklin, with Higher Immigrants, and our distinguished presenters, Dr. Morten Noack from the Bertelsmann Stiftung and Ian Hartland from Magnet, for a brilliant exchange of ideas. And thank you also to Nico Kazankat for impeccable technical support at the Cities of Migration Learning Exchange and our production team here at Rifton University. To our audiences in Cities of Migration everywhere, imagine this excellent work being interpreted in your city, adapted by your organization, or changing your neighborhood. We'd like to hear your stories and share more good practice, so please stay connected. Today's webinar recording and downloadable resources will be available at www.citiesofmigration.ca. Please bookmark the page and share it with your colleagues and networks. We value your feedback on today's session as well as your ideas for upcoming webinars in the Learning Exchange. So please take a moment to complete our online evaluation by clicking the link on your screen, and you will, of course, receive it in the post-event email that we'll be sharing with you. Today's webinar is brought to you by Cities of Migration at the Rifton University Global Diversity Exchange, where local meets global and puts great ideas to work in cities like yours. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever your own city of migration finds you. Bye now.